She says, looking at your academics and, and other things, I really don't think it's in the cards for you at all. It definitely felt alienating, especially when maybe barely 2% of the profession is actually, or people of color, specifically black. So to experiment with, like, I'm going to channel my anger, frustration in a way that creates value versus being absorbed, being controlled by it, and actually suffering from it. The creation of art and being creative is a connection to our humanity, humanity's connection to nature, and then humanity and nature's connection to the universe.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Hi, Cassidy from Buddhability here. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe. It'll help the show out, and you'll never miss an episode. If you want more Buddhability content, you can subscribe to our email newsletter in the link below. We put out great content every week. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Buddhability, Wayne. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really thrilled to hear your story. We're gonna also explore generational karma and how things connect with others and your career and family. There's many great things that we're going to get into. So thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend for this. But I always have guests just introduce themselves. So you can tell me a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do for work, anything else that you feel like is important to know about you.
Sure. So thank you for that. A wonderful and so generous introduction, Cassidy. It's a pleasure to be here and just to participate and contribute towards our greater community to uplift, people. My name is Wayne Thomas. I'm actually originally from Brooklyn, New York. I actually grew up in Bed-Stuy. Then I actually lived in Coney Island. But now I actually live in Los Angeles. Now, I've lived in Los Angeles now for more than 20 years. So now I consider myself to be bi-coastal. So I could still, still the subway and public transportation is still in me in New York City, and I can, I can handle the freeways in LA, so it's all good.
Wow, you've got the range.
Yes,
Very
D
impressive.
train, Q train, 405 freeway, 101 freeway, 5 freeway. It's kind of the
got
same
it all.
thing. So got it all. Just navigating it, right? Every day is an adventure. Lived in LA now for more than 20 years. I have a family of 2 daughters, one who just recently turned 19. She's in her second year of college at Soka University of America. And I have one younger daughter who's 15, will be 16 pretty soon. She's in her second year of high school. And she's actually at an art high school, so she's in a conservatory after school.
Oh, wow.
So it's a pretty rigorous program, but she's enjoying it, making lots of friends. And my wife, we actually met now, 28 years ago? We've been married for 27 years. We actually met in Florida at a conference many years ago.
Wow.
In our late teens. We've definitely been around for a while, so people often ask us what, did you get married when you were 8? So I don't know. So but it's been a long time.
Oh my gosh, meeting in your late teens and then you're still together, have this lovely family is really incredible. And of course, you mentioned growing up in Brooklyn, and I know you started your Buddhist practice there. So what was it like growing up in New York, and how did you find your way to Buddhism?
Sure. So just going back in the day, it was a really amazing and interesting time, just kind of looking back at it, and something that really hold dear in my heart, that I feel like so much of that actually is foundational things about me in terms of my character, core aspect, and who I am as a person. During that time, actually, I was born and raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school all throughout elementary school. And actually, it was at the time after my parents, and again, as I mentioned, I lived in Bed-Stuy. I actually grew up in Marcy Projects. Then my family moved to Coney Island. We lived in Sea Rise. And that was another housing community. And my next door neighbor was actually practicing Buddhism. And we would always hear the sound of chanting through the walls. And we thought it was the most bizarre and strange thing. So we were just what is this? this is not normal, but whatever. Oftentimes, my neighbor at the time would, just try to introduce my mom to the practice, and my mom was just very resistant, like, I don't want to hear about this. This sounds really bizarre. And that, went on for like at least a year, or a little more than a year. And then during that time, my mom was also suffering with an overactive thyroid, and some of the symptoms are like bulging of the eyes, loss of hair. Just really, her life physically was deteriorating at a really rapid rate, and just feeling like really hopeless, right? So, out of desperation, she decided, why not give it a try? And it was interesting because the neighbor at the time said, hey, why don't you just give it a try for 3 months, right? But if you do it, put your all into it for 3 months, and after 3 months, if you don't see any results, I won't bother you. Just leave it, drop it, go. But just try for 3 months. I guarantee you'll see something transpire. Guarantee you. And that was since 1985, right? So she hasn't stopped. And then, as a matter of course, she had a really transformative experience by actually being part of like our Buddhist community and learning more about the philosophy. And again, it wasn't like overnight, like something changed per se, but if anything, I think it started to instill in her that she had the power and ability to actually overcome any challenge, even if it was like a physical, ailment. So over time, proper treatment, connection to the right, medical professionals, and then eventually overcoming the illness where she was able to regrow her hair back and then grew dreadlocks.
Wow.
And so then my brother, myself, and my dad just witnessed this and was like, yeah, this seems to be the right thing to do and let's give it a try. For me personally, at the time, I was like 11 or 12 in middle school. And just growing up, I was also bused to a different community for school. So I grew up in Coney Island, but then I was bused to a school in Bensonhurst. So it was a different like cultural community as well, and kind of navigating some of the complexities with that. And also at the time I was practicing, Catholicism. I was kind of straddling both philosophies and just trying to like reconcile that on my own. But it was just through like going to church and then sometimes chanting or going to other Buddhist activities or events, I was able to kind of like contrast and compare my own as a young teen and realize that like, well, I really am kind of gravitating towards this Buddhist community because there's really true engagement at a really personable level, not where I only am involved in it when I actually physically go to a space or an event, but actually there were people much older than me who would actually visit me. Hey, let's go see a movie. What's going on? How can I help you? And that personable kind of like attention really, really helped me. So just the growing and budding of like hip hop culture in New York City and what that meant and just graffiti art and just everything. So there was so much going on around. And then I was also able to develop relationships and connections with other young Black men and other people of color. Many of them, were actually part of like the rise of hip hop culture in New York City and art and film and just so many things. So for me, it was just like, wow, these guys are doing this and they're Buddhists. This is like really, really cool. Because for me, being a Buddhist, you're such a minority. No one else is doing it. It's kind of awkward to have conversations with it with other teens and other people. But then knowing like, wow, these people I see in music videos or like doing this, I'm just like, they also do this chanting thing? Okay, this might, seem to be the right thing. So
there's something really, I think that you're kind of touching on here, really significant about having such a active and engaged community that's based on friendship and like real relationships that like we very sincerely care about each other's happiness. And I think there's, to your point, something so incredible about being around people that have navigated something that you're currently struggling with, or they're living a dream that you have, or even if it's not what your dream is, seeing people that are similar to you or from similar circumstances experiencing happiness and going after what they want. I feel like that for me was always like, oh, well, if they can do it. Like I can see what's actually possible. Prior to maybe like getting more involved in your Buddhist community, like did you notice a shift, I guess, in like your self-belief?
Well, real talk, like for me, I was
Yeah.
not a very good student in school academically, and
Yep.
through like elementary and middle school, you would typically be seated in the classroom by alphabetical order. My last name starts with a T, so I was always in the back of the classroom, specifically on the left hand side by the windows. So I would like get distracted and use my
Yeah.
Casio watch to like do reflections on the blackboard and just like doodling and sketching and barely paying attention. Not because the
Yep.
information or what's being taught wasn't interesting. It was just that I was just more of like a creative person and this daydreaming and thinking about adventures and other things just seemed a little bit more. I was just really engulfed by just being more creative and thinking about things otherworldly and so forth, not necessarily the topic on chemistry or physics or, some English literature or whatever. But one of the things that helped me when I would say for me, when I started to try out this Buddhist practice and connecting with this community, I was encouraged to like treat it like a little bit of an experiment, and I was willing to do that. Like, okay, I was told that I can really chant for my desires and that I'm going to experiment with that. So one of my first experiments was I'm going to see if actually trying this out would actually help me become a better student or at least improve academically. And I would say that it really was helpful because it allowed me to open up my mind in a way where I didn't have to like stop being creative or daydreaming or like doodling class, but how to use some of that creativity towards improving academically. So, for example, one of the things I started to learn as a result of that is that instead of repressing it, embrace it in a creative way where let's say there was a specific exam or something and I had to like memorize a bunch of like historical things and I just couldn't retain it. It was really hard for me. I would realize, oh, if I turn the image sideways, or if I see this key icon in the image, or if I remember some key things, that would help me remember what I would presume to be on the exam, whether it's remembering a specific date, the name of an artist, or like a specific milestone or event or whatever it is. So I learned how to like use some creativity to translate that or transfer that into like academics a little bit.
Wow.
It did help. I feel like that was literally a byproduct of just experimenting with Buddhism and the philosophy of it because I'll never forget that in one event that I was able to attend, someone was sharing that because the philosophy really is more cosmic and universal, all things in life is contained within you. You and the universe are connected. There's no separation. So, which means like, well, so then I just need to kind of tap into that a little bit to really try to understand the task at hand for this exam or this test, whatever. So that was one of the things I just, experimented with.
I mean, it's interesting. One of the incredible things I find about chanting is like it sort of opens up possibilities in my mind. So thinking about your example of like creative ways to study things and remember, as I chant, all of the sort of like limitations that I set for like, oh, this is the only way I can do something. Like all of the sudden I'm like, oh wow, actually there are all of these other ways that I can like solve this problem or approach this. So now you're a very successful architect. So I'm wondering like, one, did you always want to pursue architecture in particular, knowing that you were creative? And yeah, what was your like early journey to discovering architecture?
I would say it wasn't a linear path, if anything. It was just to self discovery and just
Yeah.
some lived experiences in certain settings. I mean, for me, I've always wanted to be an artist. I still consider myself to be an artist. I actually paint
Totally.
watercolors, I'll sketch, I'll draw. I enjoy film, I enjoy theater, textiles, like you name it. But it was funny because growing up as a kid, you sometimes ask the question, what do you want to do when you get older? I'm like, oh, I want to be an artist. So it's just like, what? how are you going to pay your bills or whatever? It's like,
Yep.
well, what do you mean? Like, that's what I want to do. That's the dream. Like, it's to be creative, right? So I also
Yeah.
had to struggle with like processing that. What does that really mean? Does that mean I need to like conform and maybe consider some other things that might be a little bit more traditional? Not really traditional, but like would be more likened to what other people think I should do, whether that's another
Yeah.
path related to like business, the sciences, or other disciplines, or even education. But I realized that even if I was to actually pursue other things career wise, I would always want to be creative and to like express that creativity. So why not consider a career where it incorporates, I would say by today's definitions, a lot of the classical things in an education, be it science, arts, mathematics, and then also creativity. So kind of architecture kind of like hit that way. But the other thing I felt like for me that was, I felt like I was really fortunate is, again, just growing up in Brooklyn, it's the summer, you have 3 months off. And my parents are like, it's summer, you're not going to be around doing nothing. And, just being too young to work, we're going to send you for the summer to go spend time with relatives so you don't get in trouble. So during the summers, I would spend time either in the South with my, family in New Orleans or actually in the Caribbean because most of my family's actually from the West Indies, from the Caribbean. So, and that was interesting just having that exposure to different environments. Also, I think really opened my eyes to it as a possibility. And just being in New York City, and it's just like with high rises, the skyscrapers, and historic buildings and so forth. I think create, and just honestly, just being in a subway and just public transportation, I feel like a lot of those things kind of like lend itself to like shaping and like maybe you should really consider like the built environment as a possible career. And I really feel like even though I have a career as an architect, I still feel like at my core I'm still an artist. So
Yeah.
fundamentally, just yeah.
I find so many folks that, um, yeah, pursue art in any capacity. Like, yeah, have this sense of like, at the core, I'm an artist. And right now, like, it's in this way it manifests in work, and this way I'm doing it
Hmm.
in my relationships or whatever. But I think for many people, it's like feels just so inherent to who they are. And I think it's incredible that one, that you had that kind of attunement to yourself, and then two, you were able to take action and pursue it, which I think like for many folks it can feel very intimidating. Like, yeah, I love these things, but other people are saying maybe you should pursue business or whatever the
Right.
case is. Can you tell me the story of getting into school, studying architecture, and maybe like early career?
Sure, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I was bused from my community where I live to another community for middle school and for high school. And I'll never forget this. It was a really key turning point for me. New York City public school system is like probably the largest other than Los Angeles. You have academic counselors who have large loads of students that they need to advise and deal with, right? Or at least assist them with. So my guidance counselor, I had my meeting with her, and it was probably like 10th grade or 11th grade, and like, what do you want to do? Blah blah blah. And it says, I'm really interested in maybe going to college, and I definitely want to go. And actually, I want to be an architect. And we sat down, and she really shared with me. She says, looking at your academics and and other things, I really don't think it's in the cards for you at all. So, you're better off maybe just after high school, maybe finding a really great job and a family. So it was really difficult because I was looking for like advice on like what do I need to do to pursue the path of pursuing architecture as a career and higher education, and then to be told that it's not for you was kind of heartbreaking. So I say it's a turning point because having that experience, I had the choice of like deciding that what I was told is correct and that's what it is. And when you think about it, again, I was really like a C plus student, B minus student. I wasn't really like strong academically in terms of like showing results in a classroom. And then when you look at that, it's like, yeah, maybe she's right. Maybe this is not for me, right? And by this time, I would say I was probably, a couple of years um, within the Buddhist community where I've had some pretty amazing lived experiences of seeing what we call actual proof, or a result of actually embracing it and learning more about ourselves. And I just realized, although this is really discouraging, maybe this is another opportunity where I need to experiment with this philosophy and see if prove her wrong. So I decided, no, I'm going to actually experiment and use chanting and its philosophy to um, see if I can actually be admitted into a school and pursue architecture as a career. And granted, architecture in terms of academics at higher education is very different, unlike other majors. It's because there's so much to learn to become a professional. Typically, it's not a 4 year degree. It's usually a 5 or even 6 year degree, even for sometimes an undergrad, right? Which usually requires not only just having really great GPA and grades, but also letters of recommendation and also a portfolio. You have to submit a body of work to show that you're committed to doing this, because most universities that offer architecture as a degree, um, it's a completely separate department or school. You would normally not take 2 years of general education classes or courses or core classes and then you declare a major. You declare the major upon acceptance and being on a university and starting. And it's just from day one all the way through the end. So they require a portfolio or seeing a body of your work to show that you have the talent, ability, and even means and a level of commitment. And that first year, you typically get, weeded out because it's pretty rigorous. So on my own in high school, I had to put a portfolio. I didn't have any drafting classes. I basically had to put a portfolio by myself together. So with my parents' support and, family and friends, I just bought a couple art supplies and I would just dream up imaginary projects on my own. And I would actually draw them and title them and develop a story behind them and put it all together in a form of a portfolio. And I remember one time I was getting really, really creative. I was just in the zone, and my mom in her closet had a really large collection of shoes, like a lot of shoes. So, I took like two shoe boxes and I just, cut up the pieces of the cardboard and the shoe boxes and, took some plastic and I basically created my version of what a house of the future would look like. And then I creatively used the other shoe boxes as a container to hold the model of the house that I made. And I would actually have to go to the interviews to show the portfolio to different universities. And just doing this completely on my own with honestly very little guidance or input or critique, and
Yeah.
going to them. And I will never forget attending one of the interviews or portfolio reviews, it was at Pratt Institute, and I walked with my portfolio, I showed it to the chair and to, another academic person there, and they were really impressed. And so impressed, and it says, well, what is this model that you created? So I kind of explained it, and they were just like, you didn't take any drafting classes, you have no prior experience in you doing this, like, I think you're probably a really good candidate for our school, especially being an art school. So, without really telling me, as I left, one of the associate chairs, at the time I didn't know this, but I knew the person was of some high level, right, in terms of like their status and position, said, I'm definitely going to recommend you for admission. So I assumed, like, okay, we'll see. Now, I'll be honest with you, I was not really interested in even going there because I wanted to get out of New York City. Like, I was just
Yeah.
like, I grew up in New York. I've been here my entire life. I want the real collegial, kind of experience. The basketball games, the football games, and the pep rallies, and the big campus feel, and living in the dorm, and all that stuff. And I was like, why do I want to go to school in New York City? Like,
Yeah.
especially at a school that's like only like, 30 minutes from my house. Like, no, I don't want to do that, like, at all.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate that they did offer me admission and gave me a really great financial package with scholarships that it just was obvious that I needed to clearly needed to go there. So I enrolled there. That was a really great experience because, quite frankly, although it would have been amazing to study architecture, let's say in Syracuse, New York, or Columbus, Ohio, or Houston, Texas, nothing's like New York City. I mean, like, just to be in New York City and study that, I mean, it was just a really great experience. And looking back at it, at the time I didn't realize it, but so many of the teachers and professors I had when I was there taught at some of the most elite universities. And then they were just, an associate or adjunct faculty, at Pratt as well. So just having that exposure was just really, really, really amazing. Not easy, very difficult. I mean, the program's rigorous. I mean, it was an 18 credit course load, which is basically 6 classes per semester. I mean, it was really hard.
Oh my God.
And then in most cases, being the only person of color in most of my classes was also really, really difficult. So, yeah, my first year, I think I got like a 1.8 GPA. I was basically failing out, like,
struggling,
and I was only 17 years old, right? So
oh my gosh,
it was not easy at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. As you're going through the program, what did your Buddhist practice look like, and how did you utilize it?
So after that, especially that first semester with that GPA, it was like, okay, this is maybe again. Although I had overcame the challenge of being discouraged from pursuing it with my guidance counselor in high school, now I'm actually dealing with another similar situation where I'm in the setting, and now I'm like, okay, I got here, and I'm actually like probably gonna fail out. Was she right, actually? Even though I actually kind of technically won and got here, it was one of my professors who really encouraged me, as well as some really dear friends of mine also, who I consider, both of the people I'm referencing, I would identify as like mentors. So one professor, it was like an illustration course. He basically said, look, even if you want to transfer, if you want to drop, he says, I think you have the talent and ability in you. He says, just go through this last semester and let's see what happens. But I think you have it in you. Don't give up. And then in addition to that, I also had young black men, in our Buddhist community who were also encouraging me, and other members within the Buddhist community who were also encouraging me, saying, you can win, you can definitely break through this. You already have the ability to win through this. So it combined with, having some personalized encouragement, the support, and the resources, I was actually able to do much improved the next semester, did very, very well, matriculate into the next year. And then that second year when I started, I just went on fire. It just really exploded for me academically, where I was working on projects that eventually won awards. And it was in my second year where I had received an award from the school that is typically given to like seniors or juniors, and it was the dean also, in my second year, who, just from seeing the body of work that I was creating that second year, basically recommended me to some of the top architecture firms for an internship.
Whoa.
So I actually ended up also interning in the second half of my second year at a really great architecture firm in New York City. It was funny because while working there, I got to build models and work on projects like for like Bloomingdale's and like courthouses and projects in China, and then looking back, I was like, I was gonna drop, I was gonna fail. It was not for me. And then again, just really tapping into this power, and ability that we have within us was again another example of having a transformative experience and not giving up at all. So
wow, I'm just like so inspired by your ability to like push through against the sort of like resistance of your environment, but at the same time you also have this sort of like counter momentum or pressure that's encouraging you to like keep moving forward. One thing I wanted to ask you about was like you had mentioned it was hard, especially at first, being like one of the only people of color like in your program. And I was wondering like what is maybe the demographic or like culture maybe of architecture at the time, and yeah, how did you navigate that? Like, did it feel alienating or?
Oh, absolutely. It definitely felt alienating, especially when I grew up in New York. I have my lived experience of the communities that I grew up in. The school's actually also located in Fort Greene, but most majority of the students who were actually to school didn't look like me at all, right?
Yeah.
So it was a really kind of like it's a little bit of a like personal conflict I'm kind of like struggling with in this also. And then also the profession, less than maybe barely 2% of the profession is actually, or people of color, specifically black. Yeah. So,
Whoa.
yeah. So it's very, it's very, very different. So,
Yeah.
so you can imagine the kind of spaces that I'm in and just dealing with, even just today. But I really strive to not have those kind of situations, become obstacles. And I think, so much of it is really attributed to just the philosophy that I try to practice that's really centered on humanism and self empowerment, and respect for others and also respect for myself.
What I found when we were talking before, a really interesting connection is between you and your daughters, your children, that they also, you've become a parent now and they're pursuing their own kind of dreams and passions, but they've encountered similar kind of moments of resistance from the outside or like judgment, expectations. I'm wondering like what it's looked like to support them and like you having your own experiences of having the spirit to never give up. How do you support them, let them, have their own journeys while also imparting your own like wisdom and experience on them?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and in retrospect, I almost kind of feel like maybe one of the gifts I can really give my kids, or at least offer them, would be to instill in them a sense of never giving up. Even if they decide to like never, go to college or pursue any of the things that, within certain societies we deem as like success or anything like that. The only thing for me I feel like to instill in them is a sense of their self worth, their value, their potential as human beings, and to not ever give in to what, you know, society or like their surroundings around them. If there's, negative influences. One example, as you've mentioned, and I'd like to maybe share, is with my oldest daughter. Within the community that I live in locally, we were fortunate that some of the elementary schools offered second language acquisition or immersion programs. So both daughters, starting with my oldest daughter, was enrolled in a dual language program in Japanese from kindergarten. And it was a really great experience for her, but one of the struggles was it wasn't until her second grade year where she was also struggling very much academically. And the program was structured in a way where one portion of the day is with one teacher, and it might be English, and in one room classroom where everything's in English. Then you have recess or lunch break, and then the second half of your day, you're literally meeting with a completely different teacher who only speaks Japanese, who will not speak English, and your entire classroom is also, everything is in Japanese. So by her second grade year, because she was performing not at a high level or even medium level academically, there was concerns about, well, she's doing really well and the language that she doesn't speak at home. So in my household, we don't speak, Japanese. We're only English as our primary language that we speak in our household. But she was doing really well in Japanese, but underperforming in English. Now, Teachers thought this was a little bizarre. So we decided to actually consider maybe some testing and see what other resources, obviously extra tutoring, whatever we need to do to really help her and support her. But it was through testing and seeing specialists that it was uncovered that she had an auditory processing disorder. And it's basically a neurological issue where the brain has difficulty sometimes processing specific sounds. And there's no cure for it. So being aware of that was like, oh, okay, so now we know what the issue is. Let's see what we can do to really support you. And it was a really challenge, especially when she transitioned from elementary school into middle school, because, and part of the reason why it wasn't really so much of an issue in Japanese is because of the way the academic course and curriculum was structured in a way to learn Japanese as a second language. It didn't really expose this disability that she had, unlike English. What the doctor also shared with us is that if she was not in a dual language program, none of this actually would have surfaced. It was because she was also learning another language at the same time she's also trying to gain mastery of English that this came about. So we were like, wow, it's good that we know this so we can actually help her with the resources that she needs. So fast forwarding into middle school, she still had this diagnosis, but it was she didn't have necessarily the resources in her middle school to help her. And teachers would basically call on her and call her dumb, stupid, because if she was called on in class, she would freeze to try to understand what they're saying. And if she wasn't answering it quick enough, the teacher would actually humiliate her. And this was really difficult because, one, teachers shouldn't be doing that in the first place.
Yeah.
But also we knew as parents that she's struggling with a physical ailment. So this really prompted the need to have an individual education program or an IEP, for her, to ensure that she's, successful academically. So with that, there was middle school, and then we went through COVID, and there was a stay-home order at this time. It was unknown how people were contracting the illness. So schools home. So it was, on your laptop in school. And what was interesting is she actually excelled immensely academically during COVID as a result of no longer dealing with the challenges, at least for her, of I can just focus on learning. I can focus on really processing and understanding the material and the information. I'm no longer dealing with the pressure of the socialization of school, of who you're going to hang out with. Are your snacks cool enough? Are you popular enough? Who you're going to sit with during lunch break and recess? What clothes are you wearing? All the pressures that they're dealing with. She can just focus on understanding and processing the information. So as a result of that, she excelled to the point where she literally transformed from like a C student to an A student. And then when it was time to return back to in-person classes, she questioned, well, I'm unsure if I can actually perform at the same level. And we really encouraged her, obviously using our philosophy and our Buddhist community to really encourage her. And from my past lived experiences of, no, you have it in you can win through this, don't give up. It wasn't easy at first, but even in person school, she did even perform very well academically. Long story short, because of the support that she had through IP, the philosophy of Buddhism of and self-empowerment and knowing that what she's capable of and uncovering that, she ended up graduating valedictorian with distinctions. She had her choice. She had her choice of schools when it was time to apply to colleges. And then now she's interning, at one of the best hospitals in the state of California. And I really feel like with that, we really tried to instill in him a sense of don't give up. We're going to support you. You also have the community of our other practitioners of Buddhism who also love you and care for you, and they're going to be here for you. Also consider them your auntie and your uncle. And that was really real for her.
It's incredible that, I think because of your own lived experience, I imagine you can have even deeper confidence that they can do anything. I'm sure, you know, as a loving dad, you would feel that way anyway. But I think like a deeper conviction that like we're gonna, you know, win no matter what. One thing I'm wondering is, did you experience anger or any moments of like hopelessness or sadness?
Yeah, definitely some anger. I wouldn't say
Mm-hmm.
no sadness at all because I'm just like
Yeah.
I'm just so hot. Just dealing
Yeah.
with having a teacher humiliate you in a classroom. But I really feel like one of the things I'm reminded of is within the philosophy of Buddhism, there's an understanding that emotions that we experience as human beings, whether it's sorrow, sadness, anger, elation, whatever, those are just natural things of just being a human being, and you should truly, fully embrace them. The question becomes, to what degree do you actually, in my case, just being really upset about it, those, situations, you know, do I want to fully be so absorbed in those emotions that it actually drives every single action and thing I do? Does it drive every thought, every action, and everything I say? I'm allowed to fully, have those experiences and fully embrace it. But at some point, it shouldn't dictate how I live. And that's where I feel like it needs to be transformative where it doesn't even mean that I shouldn't be angry because some may assume that, well, as a practicing Buddhist, should you just forgive and forget? No, not at all, right? This is a form of injustice. It needs to be course corrected and addressed. And at the same time, justice and being corrected can come in an array of forms. So for me, it's really about taking that anger and that frustration and channeling in a way where it was a heightened sense of realization or recognition instead of just me just being absorbed in the anger and the frustration. Channel that in a way where I want to see a result from it instead of just repressing it or being absorbed by it. And I really feel like much of that was attributed to, you know, having a really great community of practitioners of Buddhism, also the resources that I'm able to, connect with and really personalize. And again, for me, this is a constant experiment. I'm constantly feel like I'm experimenting, right? So to experiment with like, I'm going to channel my anger, frustration in a way that creates value versus being absorbed, being controlled by it, and actually suffering from it. So but yeah, so for me, that's really, it's still an ongoing battle, and it's still not
Mm-hmm.
over, but it's been
Yeah.
clearly transformative.
As somebody who grew up with very big emotions, for so long, I really struggled feeling like, oh, I shouldn't feel sad. I shouldn't feel angry. Like, those are bad emotions, which Buddhism is not about, like, everything peachy keen. We're just, like, pure joy all the time, right? But it's about bringing the enlightened nature out of whatever that thing is. So in this case, the anger, like, how do you utilize this to create value?
Mm-hmm.
Because that energy is there and actually can be
Right.
harnessed to seek justice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, that's what chanting does. Like, it helps me, like, as I'm tapping into this enlightenment, you know, it helps kind of like shine a light on whatever I'm feeling or experiencing and helps me see like, okay, how can I really utilize this to move my life forward in like a positive direction? So anyway, before I ask you more about like now your work as an architect, I'm curious if you have any favorite like Buddhist concepts or, you know, quotes or anything like that
Mm-hmm.
that you always return to in difficult moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, 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 absolutely. No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, there's one thing I do want to share, and it's from a book that was written by Dr. Daisaku Ikeda, a Buddhist philosopher, and basically it's a compilation of summarizing historical texts from the founder of Nichiren Buddhism. One of the things I wanted to share that for me is so encouraging, and I constantly reference this, It says here Buddhism is, in a sense, a science. Physics takes the physical world as its subject. Sociology looks at all social phenomena. Psychology investigates the human psyche. By the same token, Buddhism is a science that takes life in its entirety as its subject. Happiness and suffering are what it investigates. How can this world be rid of misery? How can each person lead the happiest life? How can that happiness and good fortune be made eternally indestructible? These are the questions that Buddhism pursues. So for me, like, every day, every battle is like an experiment of using Buddhism, because Buddhism seeks to try to answer the questions that ails, society, people are struggling with, so.
I feel like that actually like lends itself so well to maybe talking about your career now, because I'm wondering like, yeah, how maybe almost this investigative nature, like questioning nature and looking at things differently, how that informs your work and like, yeah, what aspects of Buddhism, whether it's like, framework or your daily practice, like how do you take that into architecture?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may, it's another reference to another book, some of my favorite books, also written by Dr. Daisaku Ikeda, and it's titled A New Humanism, and it's a compilation of his university addresses. And one of my favorite is, I think, is from 1984, I think, at the Académie des Beaux-Arts, and it's titled The Creative Garden. And in this lecture, um, he references the connectivity between art and the universe. And one of my favorite, and I'm completely paraphrasing here, he basically states how, the creation of art and being creative is a connection to our humanity, humanity's connection to nature, and then humanity and nature's connection to the universe. So the creation of art, whether it's poetry, the chair that you're sitting on or I'm sitting on, the computer monitors that we're using, the electrical devices, this everything that's created around us is an expression of art or creativity. And that it's basically what I gathered from his lecture was it is an expression of our connection to the ultimate reality of life or the cosmos. I almost kind of liken it to, film in a sense, right? Traditional media film is basically like a compilation of frames of, you know, moments, like this continuous thread or line, and that the painting you create or the conversations you have with someone or the way you choose to style your hair or the jewelry, how you accessorize, all the things that we do to create or expressions of creativity is basically framing part of the film, or at least I'm just like using as an analogy. It's basically an expression of the ultimate reality of life or the cosmos. Everything that we're creating and doing is connected to the universe. And that's what makes it so powerful and so moving is we're connecting to this higher form of connectivity that threads all of us together, at the most fundamental level, regardless of, ethnicity, background, race, gender, non gender, all of those things I feel like kind of connect us at the most fundamental level as life forms. As an architect, I strive to, like, to the best of my ability, try to make a connection between the most cosmic level of what I do and serving the clients and projects that I'm working on. And again, there's lots of deadlines and specific things we have to do and tasks, and you're constructing things, at least within my profession, of oftentimes it's a sketch on a piece of paper that years later turns into an actual physical thing that inhabits people or provides services, right? So for me, I really try to the best of my ability, try to instill some of that humanity and to the best of my ability and understanding of the greater good or greater relationship to the cosmos and ultimate reality. And more so than the actual building itself is the relationships and people that I work with. At the end of the day, nothing is more important than the people that you're working with and the people that you're serving. And I really try, to the best of my ability when I can, really try to have a very healthy, all embracing, caring, and nurturing environment with the people that I'm collaborating with no hierarchy. We're all here to be creative and have a space together to, work together. And, we have a unique and creative opportunity. One of the projects not too long ago I had the fortune of working on was, and really trying to instill this to the best of my ability, was a new dance school and performing arts center for Debbie Allen and Shonda Rhimes. And recently this project completed construction. It was a very collaborative effort and space, with Miss Allen and Miss Rhimes and their staff, their personnel, and the students. And one key takeaway when we kind of kicked off our creative venture in creating this new facility to serve traditionally underserved students in Los Angeles and marginalized communities was that the building should become, or at least a space in the building should become, a backdrop to the people who it serves. One of the things I love when working on that project, as one example, is anytime I go back to visit the facility, just seeing young people running around and rehearsing in the space and seeing performances. Literally, the team that I collaborated with of designers and engineers and graphic artists, we just basically created a physical space that allowed young people to be, free, express themselves, and to also learn. And knowing that we created this physical space for them will literally help transform, or at least help drive their next steps in their journey of their life and path, similar to the path when I was, negatively influenced in high school, told I couldn't do this. And knowing that now I'm in a position where I get to collaborate with other people with like-minded interests to create spaces that actually has a huge impact on people. And for me, I really feel like so much of, I won't say success, I really feel like it's been opportunities as a result of putting the philosophy of Buddhism into practice has allowed me to, again, have a transformative experience where I was told, you can't do this. It's not in your cards to work on a facility like this. I've even worked on, completed not too long ago, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, basically a laboratory for NASA here in Pasadena, where they actually fabricate and assemble parts for electronics for flight projects like the Europa and, Mars 2030 and all these other projects that are gone to space.
Oh my God.
Actually get to work on creating the building actually where they fabricate and test these things for outer space. Other projects for some of the largest media companies in the world. So for me, it's really about the people I work with and striving to put the philosophy of Buddhism into practice, whether it's the actual physical work, the relationships. Every day is an experiment and learning opportunity to grow. And I really feel fortunate that, these opportunities have also been recognized in the profession with winning awards and accolades and things like that. So for me, I really feel like that recognition is not so much a recognition of me or the company, it's just more of a recognition of the spirit of the work that we're trying to do when I collaborate with people.
So many folks that I've interviewed, when I ask them about their career, many times they talk about, connection of Buddhism and whatever the subject is, but they also are like, it's really about the people that I work with. And something that I'm like taking away from what you're saying is that, Buddhism is like in everything, right? Like Buddhism is in your being, how you approach the physical space, how you approach your colleagues, how you think about the interplay between the space and the people using it. And it's just really like inspiring to hear. And I really love that you shared that you feel that these awards and recognition, more than recognition of you or the people you work with, is really recognition of the spirit behind it, which I think is really beautiful and very profound, because I think that's really at the heart of everything. That's what's most important, is this like spirit to contribute. I think now I always end the interview asking for a piece of advice. So with kind of all of this, like, we've had a lovely like survey of parts of your life, and it's clear that, you know, that early moment that somebody said, I don't think you're cut out for that, you deciding, no, I'm going to prove them wrong, has like created this entire trajectory for your life and your family. So I'm wondering what advice you would give to someone who has just been told, I don't think you're cut out for that.
My advice, or if I can actually have a conversation with them, is, without me getting too emotional, is recognizing that I may not have another opportunity to speak to this person ever, and to just give them so much of myself, to remind them that you're great. As you are, you don't need to change anything about yourself other than to uncover your superhuman power. I really feel like everyone has a superhero power. Sometimes our struggles are to not recognize that we have it, or to feel like we need to compare ourselves to others. But the one thing I would want to share with someone is to never give up, and to, as much as you can, try to find the best environment and resources so you have the support that you need. It can be in the form of an actual physical person. It can become inspiration or encouragement and support from a book that you've read, a podcast you listened to, a movie you recently saw, walking through the park, whatever it takes, to be open-minded to receiving the encouragement that you need to take the next steps forward in any way, however that comes. You are a superhero, and you're gonna like totally blossom and win, and don't give up. Just don't give up at all. Just don't. Even when you feel like, not to be cliche about it, but like sometimes we'll take 3 steps forward and maybe 2 back, you still advanced. You still are moving forward. Don't give up.